Namaskar and welcome back to New Delhi, the vibrant capital of India. 25th of May is celebrated as Africa Day across the world. It was on this day in 1963 that the Organization of African Unity came into being. Although the African Union succeeded the Organization of African Unity in 2002, 25th of May continues to be celebrated as Africa Day in honor of that momentous decision in 1963 dedicated to the African unity. On the occasion of Africa Day, I wish to take you close to a river which is synonymous with the great continent of Africa. I am referring to the mighty Nile River, the longest river in the world, which has nurtured societies, cultures, and civilizations along its banks across the ages. The specific point that I want to show you occupies a very special place in the long and beautiful journey of the Nile River, the confluence of the Blue Nile and the White Nile in the city of Khartoum, the vibrant capital of Sudan. It is in Khartoum that the two Niles unite to become the Nile River, which runs through the rest of Sudan and across Egypt before flowing into the Mediterranean Sea. We are now on the streets of Khartoum, the largest metropolis of Sudan. Khartoum appears to be a vibrant and green city with beautiful tree-lined streets and gardens despite having a hot desert climate. It was a pleasant surprise to see that the streets of Khartoum are full of thriving neem and mango trees, among others. The tall building in front is the Corinthia Hotel. Apart from being the capital, Khartoum is also a major trade and communications center. We are driving along the Blue Nile. Any talk about Khartoum would be incomplete without the mention of the Nile River. In fact, Khartoum is famous for what is called Al-Mogran, the confluence of the White Nile and the Blue Nile, which is situated in the heart of this capital city. Here is a panoramic view of Khartoum and the Blue Nile from the Corinthia Hotel Khartoum. The bridge in front is the Tuti Bridge, which connects Khartoum to the Tuti Island, where the White Nile and the Blue Nile merge to form the main Nile River. The river that you see at the far end is the White Nile River. Numerous civilizations of Africa flourished on the banks of the Nile River across the centuries, including the well-known ancient Egyptians and the Nubians. The Nubians flourished along the Nile River in a region which now represents northern Sudan and southern Egypt. The Nile River continues to play an extremely important role in shaping the society and economy of the countries it passes through, including Sudan. We are now walking towards the point where the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet. On our right is the Blue Nile. We have finally arrived at the confluence of the Blue and White Niles. The river coming from the left is the White Nile, and the bridge over it is called White Nile Bridge. The river on the right is the Blue Nile. The building in the background is Sudan's National Assembly. A glimpse of the city in the background. The point where two or more rivers meet has captured the imagination of people across time and space. Such rare places in various parts of the world hold special significance for those who live close to them and attract curious visitors from far and wide. While the White Nile comes all the way from Lake Victoria in Tanzania, the Blue Nile comes from Lake Tana in Ethiopia. The meeting points of rivers are also the subject of art, literature, poetry, myths, and legends. To cite one example, Sangam, the meeting point of three rivers in India, Ganga, Yamuna, and the mythical Saraswati, holds a special place in Indian history and society because of its profound spiritual and religious significance. The meeting point of Blue and White Niles in Khartoum is no exception. It enjoys a special place in the lives of the Sudanese people. To know more about Al-Mogran, the confluence of the Blue Nile and the White Nile in Khartoum, I spoke to a dear friend from Sudan, Mr. Mohammed Salam, a fellow diplomat at the Permanent Mission of Sudan to the United Nations in New York. Let us hear what Mohammed has to say about the confluence of the two Niles as he speaks from the banks of the East River in New York.
Actually, we cannot talk about the confluence without mentioning the River Nile itself, because after the confluence, we will have the starting of the great River Nile stretching to the north through the desert of Sudan, Egypt, and to the Mediterranean. So the confluence is a sign of life for the Sudanese people. And for me personally, as a Sudanese, born, raised, and even studied and worked beside the confluence, it has a great and significant importance in my life. The confluence is considered for some Sudanese as a blessing point in their life. For example, when we have a wedding, the groom and the bride, they go to the confluence by the Nile and to put the water of the Nile in their bodies as a sign for a blessing and successful life ahead. So it actually, the confluence of the Nile touches every aspect of a Sudanese life, culturally and even livelihood. For some Sudanese, the Nile is the source of their living. They cultivate, they are fishing in the Nile, and they continue their lives. But rooted in the history of Sudanese, the Sudanese civilization is built and flourished in the banks of the River Nile. So in Sudan, we feel like we are the real manifestation of Africa. East from Ethiopia and to the south by Uganda and going to Tanzania and the heart of Africa. I think the confluence made Khartoum in particular and Sudan as a heartbeat for Africa. This is the real manifestation of being African. So the confluence is very important for the Sudanese people. If you are listening to Sudanese songs, you will find the mentioning of the confluence and the Nile in the songs that composed throughout the history until the modern time, our time now. Without the confluence of the Nile, we will not have Khartoum. And because of the confluence of the two rivers, Nile and the stretching of the Nile from that point, we call Khartoum is a tripartite capital of Sudan.
It is really interesting to know that the confluence of the Blue and White Nile rivers touches the life of Sudanese people in so many ways. A visit to the confluence of Blue and White Niles is one of the key attractions of Khartoum for tourists as well as its residents. So the next time you are in Khartoum, make it a point to visit this unique place in the long journey of the Nile River. Walking along this great river is a wonderful feeling. It feels as if one is walking through Africa's rich history. As the evening sets in, we take one more look at the confluence of the Blue Nile and the White Nile before walking away. I will soon return with another interesting place to visit. Until then, take care. Namaskar.